Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Community Development, Housing, and General Government Committee of August. As is our practice, we will take the consent agenda first. And I have C7 that's pulled because it was held in committee yesterday. And Councilmember Adams wants C5 pulled. Let me ask about any of the properties on the consent agenda, the demolition. Is anyone here for any of the properties that are suggested for demolition? Whoa, okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. May I have a motion then for all but C5
Move to
and
approve the
C7?
balance.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, very good. C5.
Resolution recommending internet service sites to AT&T as part of an ultra-high-speed fiber network.
Dennis, thank you. Will you tell us about this?
Well, background, North Carolina Next Generation Network negotiated an agreement with AT&T to bring ultra high-speed networking to a number of communities, including Winston-Salem. As part of that agreement, there's a number of benefits that are to come to the city, included 3 categories of services. One is free services to community centers. The second is free services to small and mid-sized businesses. And the third category is to apartment complexes, low-income based. So the city's challenge was to identify those locations. We will take locations approved by council back to AT&T, and as they build out the network in Winston-Salem, they will attempt to provide those free services to the areas that they are building out and that are nearby.
Okay. Do you have questions?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Dennis, the criteria, and we might have seen it the last time, but I don't remember. I'd like to kind of roll that one back and get it back to us, to me, or get it to all the council members. What was the criteria for these areas besides being a small to mid-sized business and an urban center, recreation center, whatever? And the next thing is, with all of these businesses that are said to be small to mid-size, I'd like to know the number of their employees and the product/business that they provide. That I need to see.
Okay. Would you like that then brought back, or do you want me to address any of that now?
Is this time sensitive? Because I really would like to see that. I know that we have some areas on here, sites, but a lot of these sites, I don't know of them. Even some of the ones in my ward, and not, especially all the ones in the other wards. I just want to make sure, it's just me, I need to know how many people they employ. It says small to mid-size. I need to see what that means and what type of products they produce.
Sure. The agreement with AT&T asks that the city provide these lists of locations within 120 days. Now that's, we're probably approaching that. And last month, when I discussed this with the committee, we did provide some of that information, but not the details that you're asking for. We certainly can get that information for you. I leave it up to yourselves. Like, some of that information is available, I can address, but specifically to the details about the companies, we can get that for you. Those will follow up.
Okay, thank you.
Do you think it's possible that we could have that information before Monday?
I think it's possible for us to try. We'll do the best shot at it.
So if we had 120 days, where do you think we are right now? 30 days, 20 days?
I think we're post 90 days. So we will be looking at another month The AT&T will take this information at beyond the 120 days, but the implications of that could be, as they're designing their network, they're moving forward without the knowledge of where these locations are, and they may therefore not serve somewhere that they would otherwise had they this information.
Okay.
Councilman, there's three categories of information, and the small, mid-sized businesses, the community centers, and then there's the two apartment complexes. Is there any of those categories that you would not want more information about?
I need to know the businesses. That's the ones I'm interested in.
Okay.
Because, you know, this is a benefit, and I saw your efforts to get more people or businesses or folks involved. But some of these businesses, again, I just know I don't know them. And if they're small, then that means they employ what, 0 to 50?
I think in that range, yes.
Okay. And you guys verified this?
No, I did not. This
Okay.
this information came mostly from
By
the
the
Chamber of
Chamber?
Commerce, yes.
Okay. And I also read that the Chamber said that a lot of the other sites or whatever, they weren't a part of the Chamber, but they didn't use that as a criteria
That's correct.
to be a part of this list. So I would like to know also which ones are with the Chamber and which ones are not in
That'll
that
be
data.
an easier one.
Okay.
We'll get that for you.
All right. Thank you.
Jeff, you have
I just had a quick question on the two apartment complexes.
Yes.
The AT&T will run to the building, or they will actually run to the units?
To the units.
Okay. That's substantially above the $300 to $500 price tag they have in here, so that's a pretty major deal. Thanks.
I think I would suggest, I know it's going to push right up against the limit, but based on Councilmember Adams' request and given her and the rest of the committee the time to review what our responses, it might make better sense to bring it back next month to committee.
Thank you.
fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
That'd be
you.
fine.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. So we'll hold this in committee until next month. And we will move to the general agenda. G1.
Item G1, ordinance amending Chapter B of the Unified Development Ordinances to revise recently adopted transmission tower regulations, UDO 250, proposal of Planning and Development Services staff, recommended by Planning Board.
Good afternoon, Chairman Light and committee members.
Good afternoon.
This is a text amendment that is petitioned by the Planning and Development Services staff. And what this would do is revise the recently adopted transmission tower regulations, basically to correct some technical errors that we found in enforcing the ordinance over the first few cases that came to pass. And I'll just give you a brief presentation on that. As you recall, Council recently revised the transmission tower regulations to allow towers in residential zoning under certain conditions. One such condition was that only concealed, basically stealth towers, those are either towers that look like a flagless flagpole or towers like in the image on the slide that look like a faux tree. Only those towers and monopole towers, which are the towers with the exposed antenna at the top, would be allowed in residential districts. The lattice towers, those highly intense ones found in commercial areas, wouldn't be allowed in residential. And monopine towers, such as the one on the slide, were further limited to only be allowed within existing stands of trees. However, when staff reviewed the first tower request under the new regulations, we realized that the ordinance didn't have any language that would ensure that the existing trees would be permanently retained. So we decided, with the initiative of council as well during some of those discussions, to go ahead and propose this amendment that would add language that would require all trees within a distance equal to tower height from a monopine tower would be retained for the life of the tower. So, for example, the towers you all approved last month were all 150 feet tall. This would require an 150-foot radius, roughly 1.7 acres or so of tree preservation area for that type of tower. And just for your information, this would provide more screening than any current buffer yard standard in the Unified Development Ordinances. Just as analysis, We feel that this clarification will make monopine towers have less visual impact on the surrounding residential neighborhoods. This amendment would also require trees in existing wooded areas within that same distance of tower height from other concealed towers, such as the flagless flagpoles and monopole towers, also retain those trees. So this goes beyond what was approved in the initial ordinance, and this is based on the fact that council asked for the monopole towers that were approved recently to also approve trees to retain, and we thought that made sense as well. So this ordinance proposes that all stands of trees that are required to be retained would be on land either controlled through an easement or owned by the tower operator. So this is just another safeguard to make sure that folks don't get in a situation where property changes hands and then the trees that were supposed to be retained are somehow clear cut. This amendment also has one last provision, and that would clarify that photo simulations for stealth towers are only required for towers requiring city council review. We have that standard in the ordinance right now for photo simulations for monopole towers, and when our staff was reviewing the photo simulations for stealth towers, we realized that someone may want to do one of those towers on commercial zoning, for example, which doesn't require a city council special use permit. It just gets a staff zoning permit review. So there's nothing that requiring someone to do that photo simulation just to be reviewed by our staff would really get any benefit from, since we don't have that special use permit authority to ask for any changes. So that's why we're making that clarification. And overall, staff believes that this amendment will allow for both easier enforcement of the existing ordinance and will also clarify the expectations on petitioners when they come through the process with towers in the future. So staff does recommend approval. This was recommended for approval by the City County Planning Board last month, and I'll be glad to answer any questions of the committee.
Thank you. Questions?
I know you've got some.
It occurred to me that, I mean, you know, I think this is, I'm glad the staff caught these gaps in our ordinance, but it occurs to me, what if this stand of trees is all deciduous, and here you have this monopine sticking up in the middle of it? I guess one of the questions I have is that as much an eyesore as, you know, having another kind of tower would be, or more of an eyesore, I guess is what I'm asking. Well, a slick stick instead of a tree that doesn't fit its surroundings.
I think from a staff perspective, when we were kind of working with the citizens and the council to craft a compromise ordinance, we wanted to leave a menu of different options available, and rather than have too many limitations on what a stand of trees was or wasn't in terms of where you could have the monopine towers, we felt that it was maybe a better solution to have different options on the table and let that be approved one way or another through council as it went through the special use permit review process. For example, you may have, based on topography or view sheds, various things like that, and also the size of the trees, it's kind of hard to pin down exactly what a stand of trees is. Would 4 champion trees have the same effect as 20 just regular individual specimen trees? So again, we tried to have something that would, you know, have some solid standards to it, but not be so specific that it ties people's arms when they're trying to get the best fit for what the citizens in an area want.
To go to what you just said about what the citizens in the area want, the first couple of these that we've done, and Mr. Bushnell brought this up in his letter that he circulated to a couple of council, I don't think we have a real good process for finding out what people really want, because we end up making a decision up here, an aesthetic decision, that we may have only heard from a couple of people who are affected by it. I'm just not comfortable with that process. And I know that's not in here for this evening, but this is something that we can continue to tweak as we go along, correct?
Absolutely.
But I do think that that's a pretty haphazard process right now, and I'm not comfortable with it.
Certainly, council has a prerogative to modify this ordinance with any text amendments it sees fit over time. I'll give you an example of another amendment we did in the last decade or so is the sign ordinance. We did that text amendment, and I believe there were actually 2 successor text amendments within the following year or 2 after that council saw a few things that they wanted to make some tweaks to help it to achieve their vision for that amendment.
I support the proposal here as a reasonable attempt to codify what we're trying to do with the tree protection. Stop me if someone's already brought this up, but the gap between what we conceptualized, I think, in the process and what we're dealing with is we don't have any way to impose a selection between alternatives. The menu is there, but the selection at this point is almost entirely at the discretion of the applicant. When they want to press for an alternative, unless it's a lattice tower, essentially they can do whatever they want if we approve the permit at all. And it's been emphasized to us that we have limited grounds of which to disapprove a permit that meets the specific requirements of the ordinance.
That's right.
So it seems that what we need to look for in a next round of revisions would be some way to have the ability, not necessarily use it every time, but have the ability to require a hierarchy of choices in tower types when there is a clear preferred option for one that will be less intrusive in a particular situation.
Thank you. Again, we appreciate all of the work you guys have been doing on this because it's been a lot. And again, just as we, on this journey, as you stated, there's going to be more revisions to this, I foresee, than we probably even have an idea until we think we have it right. And we may not even have it right then. But the main thing about it is, as you said, ensuring that the citizens have a choice. We can't, as Councilmember Bessie said, we can't make that choice for them. We could, but we don't want to do that. We need to have, again, a process in there that allows the community to decide, and it needs to be more than 1 or 2 people. Yeah. Because, 1 or 2 people may have a vision of what they want to look at, and 30 other people may not agree with it. So we need to have some type of process in place, much like I don't know, some numbers or percentage like the parking on the lawn or anything else. We need to have a data-specific process way of getting to that approval rating of what type of cell tower that the community may want. Again, in keeping with the letter Mr. Bushnell sent out and including what Councilmember Light sent out as well, I, too, agree that I think this is a good stab at what we're trying to do right now. But again, I also realize that I foresee us making some more revisions as time goes on, as people come to us for this request. So again, thank you.
Thank you.
To go to Dan's question, I want to ask City Attorney, as the way the ordinance is written now, we cannot specify what type of, I mean, I know that the applicant, the American Towers, has always said, we don't really care. But if we were to say we want them all to be slick sticks, is that something that we can impose?
Not now, not based on the current draft, and I have to go back and look and see whether or not the state law actually allows it.
And I also realize that if we do that, we then are basically saying that there's going to be more attempts to put more poles up because the coverage isn't good, so we've got to balance that out. But we don't have the ability to right now to specify.
Right.
Okay.
That would take a change. Yes, sir.
There are a couple things that I'd be interested in if there's a good way to do it. One is some set of factors in which we could require slick stick as the alternative. Some type of minimum distance range or other set of circumstances in which we can, as a policy matter, say, we think this is the only appropriate freestanding alternative to use under these circumstances. And then in other cases where it's a situation in which, lattice is barred, but it's not appropriate to say slick stick is the only option, some way of in the absence of an open legislative, quasi-legislative process that we don't have here, some way to press opponents or neighbors or questioners to give us an alternative. So even if you are saying we don't want it at all, if it's going to happen, would you rather have a monopine or a monopole? And we tried to do that a couple of times in recent cases with opponents who were saying, well, which one is going to be less obtrusive in your eyes, a monopone or a monopine? And we were getting responses say, we're not going to say, we just don't want it. And when it was clear that under the facts as we had before us in that case, it was not going to be a denial, we still couldn't get a response from those folks who were able to take the time and effort to actually show up at the hearing in person. So we were without guidance.
Yeah. Another thing that has confused me over these the first attempts for us to handle these cases is that our new ordinance specifically says only concealed towers are allowed in residential districts. To my mind, a slick stick or a monopine in a stand of trees or something stuck inside a church steeple, which in fact would be a slick stick, I suppose, are concealed. A monopole with arrays of antennae are, to my mind, absolutely not concealed.
Councilmember Light, not sure if there was a copy of the ordinance put in with these materials or not, but based on the approved ordinance, monopole towers are allowed in residential.
Yeah, but somewhere else in it, it says only concealed, and to my mind, that's totally, opposite. So I think that is something that we also need to look at because the monopoles with the arrays have caused at least from what I've heard from people, have caused the most concern because certainly they're not concealed. And so as we start reworking this, that would be one of my suggestions, that you have monopines in stands of trees or slick sticks. But at any rate, we've sort of wandered around this ordinance, but certainly if we could ask staff to, and of course our attorney to start working with us on another amendment to this UDO 250. So, but in the meantime, do I have a motion on this amendment?
Move for approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Councilmember Light, would you like staff to bring anything back to the next committee meeting?
Yes, that
Okay.
if we could, incorporating some of these, certainly the concealed towers versus monopole. Certainly some way to poll a neighborhood about what they would prefer, or if in fact we say it's either or, then if it's in a stand of trees, it's going to be a monopine. If it's not, it's going to be a monopole. So yes, ma'am.
No, when you and I had spoken, I guess a couple of weeks ago, you were interested in eliminating the monopole as an option.
Yes.
So do you
Did I
want-
misspeak just now?
I thought you still wanted it in there.
No.
Okay.
Slick stick. That's what we got. That
thing.
causes confusion.
Okay.
But yeah, if you could come back to us with some further revisions to see. Another thing that I would ask is certainly, I think the county ordinance says 150-foot top height. I'm not sure. No.
If you look at the chart,
Yeah.
the height is 180, but then it talks about towers on lots with non-residential uses, towers up to 150 feet. It's on page 21.
Yeah.
The towers that were 150 feet in the county version were actually approved at the staff level,
Staff.
so that was the incentive for those shorter
But
towers.
since we have not accepted that as an option, that's another thing that I wonder about. Certainly what we've been asked for in the 4 cases that we've had have been 150-foot towers. And in effect, even with the monopine, I mean, that's probably 50 to 75 feet above a regular stand of trees, or even a big stand of trees. So a stand of the big trees. So that may be something that we should take a look at some more too.
Okay, we'll work with Ms. Carmen and her staff and bring you something back at the next committee meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Did we vote on
Yes.
this? Okay, all right, thank you. G2.
Ordinance amending Chapter B of the Unified Development Ordinances to eliminate the planning board findings of fact requirement for elected body special use permits. UDO 251, proposal of the city attorney's office, recommended by the planning board.
Good evening, committee members. This is the same book, but a different chapter. As we were going through this first round of hearings on special use permit hearings on cell towers, in discussion with the city attorney's office, we realized that the present process of how these cycle through the planning board before it gets to the elected body can leave some confusion in the process about how it works. Specifically, right now in the ordinance, the planning board has a role up front before the case even gets to the council in that there is a public hearing, there's a review of the site plan, the planning board makes its own findings, some of which overlap with the ultimate findings that the council has to make, and then the planning board makes a recommendation, and then the minutes of their deliberations and discussion then are passed on to the city council for its quasi-judicial hearing. So there's several problems with that as we realize that. And it's not just limited to cell tower special use permit hearings, it's any special use permit that comes to the elected body which presently cycles through the planning board. And that is, first of all, overlapping findings. Secondly, the planning board is having a public hearing that is just a regular public hearing. There's no sworn testimony. It's not a quasi-judicial process there. And then the planning board is publishing its minutes of the discussion with both citizens' comments and the planning board's discussions. And they're coming to you as unsworn it's hearsay evidence from a legal perspective when it comes to you. So that poses some problems there that we want to try to eliminate. So what the proposed solution there, again, in conjunction with the review of the attorney's office, is that we would change the planning board's role to simply being a planning board review of the proposed site plan. And it would be a technical-based review. Are they meeting all the requirements of the ordinance? Are all the details that are needed in the site plan shown there and all that? So they're not making a judgment as to the appropriateness of the cell tower, because that basically is the council's decision. And it does it through a special use permit quasi-judicial process, and so only the council can make that determination. So keeping the planning board out of that and just simply keeping its role to a technical site plan review basis. So that's the gist of this amendment. There would be so it would come to the planning board as simply a site plan review, no public hearing. We will post a sign for any special use permit, but the sign will make it clear that the focus of the public hearing is the elected body, not the planning board. So the site plan review that comes to the planning board, it will come in a public meeting, the same public meeting that it has its normal rezoning public hearings, but the site plan itself would not be a public hearing item. So any citizens who would wish to have their say, we would then direct them to the council's special use permit, quasi-judicial public hearing, and that way they can focus on that meeting and that meeting alone, as opposed to trying to weigh in with their opinion at the planning board, which can then get confusion into the process. So that's basically what we're proposing.
Questions, yes.
Not a question, but I want to again thank staff for reviewing this process, and the city attorney and everyone for realizing anything again that we can make user-friendly for our citizens, particularly as you know, sometimes we've had council meetings whereas the people were at the public hearing for the planning board, maybe for a special use, and then it gets to us, and between you and Attorney Carmen, it was like, and us, the citizens, you could tell they were getting frustrated. So I appreciate you fixing this fix. I really do. Thank you.
This should be evident to me, but planning board is a city and county
That's correct.
function. The role of the county commissioners in deciding on cell tower placement is different than
Right.
us.
The county adopted what originally came through the planning board as its recommended text amendment to the cell tower ordinance, which basically put the residential tower decision at the Board of Adjustment.
Okay.
So,
So I just heard a collective sigh of relief from the members of the planning board over this.
I think they appreciate getting rid of the confusion.
I'm sure.
Mr. Bessie.
I think the concept of the amendment is good. The one problem with the new procedure would be that as a council member, I rely in part on the record of proceedings before the planning board to forecast which items are likely to be controversial and need a more thorough review, and to forecast what issues are likely to be raised, so that I'm better prepared to listen and determine what facts I need to draw out of the testimony at the hearing. No public hearing at all before the planning board would impede my ability to look ahead and prepare. Is there a process that we could use in the alternative that would serve that function? In a true judicial setting, you have discovery, you have pretrial hearings. Everybody in the courtroom who's doing their job is ready for the main hearing. In a quasi-judicial hearing with only one, in a quasi-judicial proceeding with only one hearing opportunity, you can't really necessarily do your job. How can we address that? Any idea?
I mean, we can think of some alternative ways, which talks about maybe the planning board having sworn testimony presented to it instead of the current process. That didn't seem to draw too much of a favorable opinion from the members of the planning board.
Yeah, well, I can understand why, when the council is, as we are, bullheaded enough, we're going to make our own judgment calls on those things. Then, to a planning board member, it may seem like an exercise in futility to be making judgment calls that are going to be reviewed de novo by the members of the council. And I don't want to make them waste their time. I would like some way for the parties to be presenting their arguments in some form before it gets to the hearing where we've got to make a decision that night, 4 times out of 5.
I guess the only thing again, it will be unsworn, it will be hearsay. I can try to think of maybe some other way. Maybe present it to staff, so be presented in the form of a report. We can look at it.
Yeah, just something, and it's like a filing in a court case. That doesn't count as evidence.
Right.
That's just this is what we're going to argue. And you don't have to do it, but your party's encouraged to do that.
Right,
Yes.
it's an option.
How do other jurisdictions handle that?
From what I understand, most of them have the zoning board of adjustment make the decision.
Right.
So those things don't come to council.
Well, and you have the same issue. If it's an elected body special use permit, then the planning board is usually doing just a technical review.
Maybe we can add a step, maybe they could submit a filing, maybe an affidavit of their concerns, something before the hearing, sworn affidavit.
Either sort of at the participant's option, they can submit a sworn affidavit of concerns, which we could then take as evidence in the proceeding, or they could just present this is quasi-judicial. This is supposed to be citizen-friendly, so try to make it as informal as possible. But just, what are you going to try to argue? Somehow put that out there. What's your case going to be? Why is this a good idea or a bad idea that you're going to be prepared to try to prove to?
Well, in that case, I don't know that would necessarily have to go to the planning board first.
Oh, no, it doesn't. It
Right.
doesn't. I mean, it would fit into the current proposal, just additional steps.
Yeah, and that way, we could also perhaps remedy what we've run into in the 4 cases that we've had where inappropriate testimony is blurted out. And so if there's that intermediate step, maybe people can be warned off ahead of time. You cannot talk about that.
Yeah, we've had 2 free training sessions now, and I think we'll continue to do those. I think that's probably just going to happen because you have some citizens that are just emotional about this. And
Right.
They want to try to tell you their side, despite the warning.
Yes.
And
I'd like to suggest that we hold it in committee, get probably some options language back on that opportunity to present to outline your prospective pitch, optional ahead of time.
Okay.
Not
All
required,
right.
but an option.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll leave that in the hands of the city attorney, and if that's okay with the committee. Okay? Consensus. Very good. Thank you.
I'm going to try to bring it back, I guess, September.
Lovely. Let's see. This is G3, but it's C2 finance.
That's the ordinances changes.
G3.
Report on minority and women business enterprise disparity study. This item was continued from the June meetings of the Finance and Community Development, Housing and General Government Committees.
Seat. All right. We had a nice discussion about this yesterday, and it was held
in committee.
But certainly Councilmember Bessie and Councilmember McIntosh were not there. So if we could have a report on this, there he is.
Good afternoon again.
Good afternoon.
Yesterday, we gave a report on the disparity study. The memo of information at the request of the, I believe, June committee was to gather some information on other cities that have already done disparity studies. And so we looked at 4 cities, Greensboro, Charlotte, Memphis, and Columbia, South Carolina. We provided you with an idea of how the disparity studies actually looked by providing the executive summaries for each city, which are between 10 and 20 pages. Of course, the full reports are between 200 and 400 pages. But we've looked at who provided the studies. As you see in the matrix, MGT of America is very popular at winning those RFPs to do such studies. The cost of the studies, which ranges for the ones that we could get the information between $200 to maybe $350,000, $400,000. And we provided some information from those different cities as to the utilization. Subcontracting is a key factor, particularly in construction, as well as we looked at professional studies. And then we provided some significant findings and recommendations that we pulled out of the disparity studies. And we looked a little further to see some of the recommendations if they were actually implemented and if we could find such info. And so we provided that to you.
Are there any questions? What was decided in Finance Committee yesterday was that's even though these are executive summaries, it's still a lot to digest. And also, the Finance Committee held this in committee and has asked for further information, perhaps an easier way to visualize key findings, and also to perhaps be able to cherry pick from those findings from the other cities and to see how that compares to what Winston-Salem has in our MWBE. So that is in the hands of the city manager.
We'll be
and
back in October.
October.
And what I heard too was we're going to bring some recommendations of what we see as what are the maximum things that we can do without a disparity study within the law to increase our MWBE program. So you're going to see, here's what the other cities are doing, here's the best practices, some of which we're already doing, and here's some additional things we can do. And to do any more than that, we'd have to do the disparity study.
And what concerns me is, as I said yesterday, if in fact you do a disparity study and it's found in that study that we are doing more than is required or by that study, we would actually have to back off. I know Councilmember Adams is all for the study, but we're going to try to save a little money. Yeah.
I told you I was trying to be nice
Nah,
today.
that'd be nice.
I'm going to be nice. Again, if the numbers told us that we were doing such a great job in reaching out and including minorities, we got the women. Everybody understands that. We have more women business than we can handle. We got it. But it's the minorities, and I think sometimes people don't quite understand what that means. That means African Americans, that means Latino Hispanics, that means Indians, that means Asians, and all others. We are not reaching them. And you can't tell me that a lot of the businesses, I know I heard yesterday that the data says, as Councilman Clark says, the larger contracts are not, minorities don't own those type companies. But like I said, economic development, community development is about enhancing the prosperity of a community. And if we're not doing enough, we're good. I gave us that. We're good. But we need to be better because we are not reaching the numbers of minority businesses that are out there, that are every day out there doing work. And as someone said, I think Councilmember Montgomery, if I've tried to bid and maybe I didn't do it quite right, and I tried again and I didn't do it quite right, then I can't spend my time trying to get a bid in with the city. I still got a family to feed. I got 4 or 5 people working for me. I got to make my money. Councilmember McIntosh understands it as well. I got to go still make money. I just think that a disparity study, because I know for me in business, data is power and it's knowledge. And if we're going on the warm fuzzy of what we think we're doing, then again, I just don't think we're doing all that we can do. And that's why I'm pushing for this study. And I'm looking for, staff and the city manager and others to get together, like the state told us, and get more creative and innovative as to how we can make this happen. This will be the first round, Councilmember Light. As you said, I went with it, that we go and look at the reports that they've given us, and they pick some of the best practices, the BBPs, and they bring them back and put it in a matrix that we can read, not like that, with a magnifying glass, as to what we're already doing. Look at Councilman Best, he had to take his off. And
these are bifocals.
And put side by side those other 4 cities of what they're doing. Now, mind you, what I learned, City Manager Garrity, at the workshop a couple of weeks ago, was that if we're only benchmarking, and we did pull Memphis out, if we're only benchmarking the cities in North Carolina and South Carolina, Virginia, and Tennessee, then we're benchmarking the wrong people. They good, but we need to look at even other further west or north, other cities comparable to our size or bigger that have some success stories. And again, at a workshop I attended, there were some big cities with some success stories, such as Houston and Baltimore and others. Councilmember Light and committee, again, I'm going to go with what was recommended by the Finance Committee. But again, I'm looking for us to change our mindset and our culture that we have in our head, that we're doing all that we can do, because I think we can do better. I just feel like that. So,
It's an interim step. Perhaps.
yes.
To exactly that point, I'd rather spend $250,000 to $400,000 actually making those changes, if we feel like there's a sense after we've done our, some research, that we need to make things better, and I think that sense exists. But I'd rather spend that money making those changes rather than studying them.
I'm still pondering.
Yeah, well, as I say, I have not read through all of it yet, so I'll take it on my vacation.
I was squinting over it over the weekend and
Yeah.
looking at the grid charts.
And I just want to make one more comment. There is a lot of money being spent in this town by the city of Winston-Salem. And I'm going to say it because this is what I think I know. And everybody's not benefiting from the taxpayers' dollars. The taxpayers' dollars are for everybody to benefit. Not the same businesses over and over, and we get together with our experts and we decide that, well, they've done it before, they've done a good job, let's use them again. And then that's the data I asked for from Mr. Faraday and anybody else that wants to bring it, Mr. Garrity. I need to see over the past 3 years all the contracts by business.
We're working on it.
And I know it's going to take a while, but that's what I'm looking for, because that's data. And if it shows me that we are truly out giving business to minorities, and as we said, the service areas, paper, whatever, but I believe we can do better than that. We just don't own paper copy shops. We do construction, we do contracting, we build things, because I have them at my house all the time. And I'm talking not just African Americans, I'm talking Asians and Latino Hispanics, and they do a tremendous job. I do not think that the businesses in this city that do business with the city of Winston-Salem could do what they do if they were not using minority workers. That's just my thing. And I just believe, and I'm going to end it with this, I still believe we can do better, and I believe the data is going to show us where we can do better at.
Chairman Light, I would add we can do better. We're working hard on it. In addition to increasing our spending with minorities, we can do a better job, and we will do a better job of increasing our local spending with businesses, minority and majority, within the corporate limits of Winston-Salem.
Yeah, certainly. Your memo pointed to that. Let me bring up one other thing that was talked about yesterday, and certainly we've talked about it before. This totally confusing thing of being on the appropriate list before you can bid on whether it's the state hub list
Historically underutilized businesses.
or the DOT something else list. And someone made the suggestion yesterday about, what about a
Councilmember
Winston-Salem list?
Yeah, Councilmember
And
Taylor.
would that be relatively easy to come by? No. Mr. Faraday, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say the city of Charlotte has their own certification nowadays, probably based upon, say, the disparity studies and maybe some legal aspects. And so that provided them the opportunity to create their own certification versus using the hub. But we use the hub based on the North Carolina general statutes towards the MWBE program. And that's what we can count.
Yeah. Mr. Bessie?
Correct me if I'm misunderstanding this, but it's not a matter of you can't bid unless you're on the hub list. We just
We can't.
count you as an MWBE.
Right.
if
Right.
You're not
Yes.
on the hub.
We can't count you as a subcontractor.
Right. And as I understand it from previous discussions over the last couple of years, we could, and perhaps already are, please tell me if we are, assist local businesses who believe they ought to qualify in getting on those lists. The reason I have been skeptical of the value of launching an independent list is the alternative concept of why don't we simply make sure that anybody who thinks they ought to qualify for that is able to get on the state list. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, and that way that business is on everybody's list to qualify. So, I mean, if there's a sort of an argument to the value of doing our list instead, I'm prepared to listen to it. I just haven't heard it yet.
Mr. Page had a clarification.
And I think Councilmember Bessie hit it right on the head. Up until about 3 years ago, each community had its own MWBE certification. So if you want to be certified, you had to go to Charlotte, Raleigh, Greensboro, Wilmington, Durham, Asheville. Yeah, about 20 different communities across the state that you had to go to in order to be certified. In order to streamline the process, the MWBE Coordinators Network had been working even in the early 1990s when I was doing MWBE to try to create a uniform certification process. About 3 years ago, that was actually approved through changes in state law. As part of that single certification, the state said, okay, you can get a uniform certification now that's good throughout the state, but in order to do that, you also have to be on the state list to be recognized as MWBE. So in addition to the single certification, there's a single list that the state is now saying that this is the list that is sort of the master list for the state. Yes, we can create a local list, but it sort of defeats the purpose of what we've been fighting for the last 20 years is a one-stop certification process and list for MWBEs or historically unutilized business hubs. The difference between the hub list and the NCDOT list is that NCDOT uses a definition that's under the federal guidelines, which is a DBE, Disadvantaged Business Enterprise. Under the DBE, it's very similar to what Charlotte is using now, which is a SBE, a Small Business Enterprise, where groups, there are about 8 different groups outside of gender and race that are recognized. Vietnam veterans, Appalachian residents, Section 8 certified by SBA. So they get completely out of the definition of minority or race or ethnic gender, race or ethnic gender. And so they're completely out of that. So that's why we can't use that DOT list, which is completely different. It includes the hubs, but it includes several other categories as well. So what we're trying to do is, by using the state list, I think you're right, Councilman Bessie, that what we're trying to do is direct people, and we'll hold workshops occasionally to make sure folks are getting on that list, and it benefits them in the long term because they're then able to be certified throughout the state for different programs.
And do you think that we are actually reaching the right people to get them to these workshops and helping them to get certified?
But we're always trying to spread the word and let people know of the services we provide. About 2 months ago, I did a workshop at the SG Atkins CDC. About a dozen business owners came. We talked about the step-by-step. We went online on the big screen, helped people start their certifications. People come into the office, several people are called each month, and I assist them with, giving them the information if they need somebody to go over it with them, But it's plenty more people who probably could use it, and we're always trying to let people know. And one extra thing, each month the people who purchase business licenses from the city, I get those lists, those that may be minority, and I send them a letter just letting them know about the MWBE program if they want to be certified, and they can come into the office or we can talk and move it beyond there.
Very good. Mr. Bassett?
How long does it take? Is it a lengthy, expensive, difficult?
It is free, and it's good for 4 years. It's not particularly lengthy. It's just a lot of information they have to gather. And if they didn't take the time to do that, say, when they first opened their business, it may take them some time. But it's information such as if you're incorporated, your articles of incorporation, if you have a bank account under the business name, if you have specific leases or equipment, just all in references to show that this is a legitimate business owned by minority. The whole process from start to end, as long as they gather all the information and send it to Raleigh, normally at most takes 30 to 45 days. It can be quicker if they aren't overwhelmed in the Raleigh office.
Is there any argument for a shorter list of requirements or an easier process? I'm trying to give an honest chance to the suggestion that we ought to do a local one instead.
Well, I think they have put that into place to, protect the program, to make sure, because, see, there are some people who may say if it's a majority-owned husband that, does a trade, and then he puts the business in his wife's name just to get that credit, they ask for all this information and references, and sometimes they will even come from Raleigh to do site visits to make sure that the businesses are legitimate. So the requirements, I think, have some, quality and, value to them, likely.
Thank you.
Councilman Adams?
Thank you, Councilmember Light. One other piece of information that I'd like to have is how many businesses, minorities, have we helped and assisted through this process? And how many of them actually got the certification since we started doing this, Because, I don't know. I know that when I was with the Housing Authority years ago and when I got put on that board, that commission, I saw some things again, fresh eyes, that we needed to be able to change to be better service to the customers of public housing. One of the things that I kept hearing when I would be at meetings was, well, we send out the information, well, we do this, we call people, we whatever. I don't think we do enough outreach. I don't think we do enough old school outreach with the people in the inner city or the businesses that we want to help. I don't think you're going to find those people sitting by a phone or a computer or You know, I think we need to, Mr. Garrett, I really do, again, launch a prototype plan. I think we need to put on some casual clothes, some polo shirts and jeans and sneakers, and we need to hit the sidewalk sometime just to get that look. Because if we're looking for people, and we do, we live in a technological world, I got that. But if we're looking for our citizens to contact us via email, go online, phone, text, tweet, it ain't going to work. It's just not going to work. That's why we have land phones at our houses, and it's nothing to, between this morning and about 2, I had 11 phone calls, because they know that that phone call on that card and on that website, if they call it, they might get the voicemail, but they know I'm going to call them back. We do that. And if I need to place a call to any of the staff, it's logged. At that point, you guys hit the ground running to make it happen. I think we might need to change how we outreach on a couple of programs that we offer our citizens if we're going to increase our small business community and assist the ones that are in need. I think we need to look at how we might need to change how we do that just a little bit. I really do.
One of the things that Greensboro recently did was a couple exposés related to this issue. Mr. Page and I have talked to Mr. Brooks about doing something similar here. Something else, and I was talking to Mr. Page this morning about that we're working on two things. We're working on a buy local policy that we're going to bring to council. Greenville, North Carolina has passed one. And what I'd like
they beat us.
What I'd like to see is not like what we will do is we'd like to be able to, with that local certification for local as well as minority, have that in our financial system already coded. So when we're making decisions on purchasing, the smallest numbers to the large numbers, it's already there. This is a hub certified vendor. This is a Winston-Salem vendor. And then when we do reporting, you push a button, it comes out. So we will get there on that as well.
Thank you.
That's great.
Thank you.
Very good. So, what's the pleasure of the committee? Just to go ahead and hold this as finance did? Okay. All right. We will do that. Mr. Faraday, thank you. Thank you again. Okay, Kelly, I think you're up now. G4.
Presentation of report, public art, planning, and opportunities for the City of Arts and Innovation.
Good afternoon, Councilmember.
Good afternoon,
Kelly.
Committee members. This presentation shares the highlights of a report on public art that planning staff completed for the planning board a couple months ago. It answers some questions on what is public art, why public art for a city, what Winston-Salem's done with public art, what our peer cities have done, and then gives several examples of public art from around the world, really, and then different partnerships, funding, and other challenges that come along with this. So what is public art? It's really art that's in the public realm. It's visible from public space. It can be privately owned or publicly owned, but you can see it in the public realm, any medium. That's what we'd consider public art. This grew out of the Legacy 2030 Comprehensive Plan process. It generated a lot of discussion and then developed into several recommendations on completing a public art plan and different places where people would like to see public art and how that would operate. So why would a municipality be interested in public art? The Knight Foundation did a study a couple of years ago, and they found that creating these emotional attachments to your community translates into higher local GDP growth. And just boiled down, that means that people that are proud of their community invest in their community. And one of the ways to generate that pride is through public art. And it brings me back to the story that I found when researching this about the coffee pot. It's an icon of Winston-Salem now, but 100 years ago, it was an advertisement for a tinsmith in town. And a motor vehicle driver got going the wrong way, crashed into it, knocked it over. The city wanted to demolish it, but there was this large public outcry. And this object had suddenly become public art. It became this icon of the community, a landmark, and people protested this idea that the city would tear this down, and it's been resurrected, and it's a part of our community ever since. So public art also builds the brand of Winston-Salem. It contributes to our sense of place, encourages creative placemaking, increases tourism, it can catalyze development, enhance public spaces, but also roadways, gateways, parks, can transform underused spaces, and we can live up to our name more and more as the city of arts and innovation. Winston-Salem has done a lot of public art. Lots of organizations have been contributing over the years. Creative Corridors, Downtown Arts District Association, Art for Art's Sake, Wake Forest Innovation Quarter, this sculpture, but also the bike racks I would consider public art. Winston-Salem Light Project once a year puts together a project. SECA and Winston-Salem State several years ago put together a project on the Winston-Salem State campus. The city's ordinance allows for public art in the big box ordinance. It's an option for developers as part of their development. Winston-Salem Dash. And then there's municipal public art. This is brickmaker George Black, the county building. And then the Centennial celebration generated several pieces of art, including several bike racks. And then the Centennial sculpture, which the city is funding through a public art line item that was previously in the budget, and the Arts Council is actually raising money for the platforms that these will be on through this Power to Give platform, which is a crowdfunding application. So many cities in North Carolina approach public art through a public art plan. Asheville, Cary, Charlotte, Durham has a cultural master plan, which is more broad. Hickory has a public art plan. Raleigh has this policy framework that acts like a public art plan. And a lot of these are governed through the municipality or a nonprofit or a combination. And many are funded through what's known as 1% for art. Capital budget, 1% would go to public art. Some through the general fund, some are not funded. Raleigh has a 0.5% capital construction budget, and some just through nonprofit fundraising. So why a public art plan? Public art plans typically coordinate venues, art types, and themes, not necessarily specific projects. They anticipate opportunities, can build on the current approaches, and then really pull this together. The expertise, the visibility, brainstorming, purposely making it happen, making it more equitable. It doesn't have to just be downtown. It can be throughout the city, in parks, greenways, areas like that. It basically facilitates public art. So these are several examples of public art in our peer cities. Greensboro works on public art through a nonprofit endowment. Asheville has a city-led public art plan. Louisville also has a city public art plan. Charlottesville has a nonprofit called Arts in Place, which brings temporary public art to different gateways and roadways throughout the community. They have a contest where they bring in 10 sculptures every year for 11 months of the year. And then the city usually buys one piece. So the city's been collecting public art over the course of the last 10 years or so. Greenville administers their public art plan through their economic development office. They have this Mice on Main program that has 9 small sculptures throughout their downtown. It's an activity for children, and it's spawned T-shirts, board games, things like that. It's really become part of their identity. So I'm going to show different images from public art from around the world, just to show its potential. It can be inspiring, it can be humorous, functional, and it need not necessarily be expensive. Just going to move through these pretty quick.
I love that one.
This is an artist, Rhodesworth, that actually worked with Sika in Winston-Salem State here in Montreal. Stuck. Let's see. It can be functional, bus stops,
That's
bike racks. And a lot of cities have these utility box programs that pair artists with the utility boxes. Can transform whole neighborhoods and these underused spaces. This just brings to mind for me where the strollway goes under Business 40. It's kind of a dark place, but it's a public place. Be lightened up.
Oh.
Also our public spaces. There are 2 typical governance models, one where local government leads, and others where a nonprofit organization leads. And there are lots of potential partnerships in Winston-Salem. And since this initial presentation to the planning board, I've heard from several of these organizations, and we have a couple here today, Arts Council, Jim Sparrow, and Sika, Cora Fisher here. They know this isn't a public hearing, but they wanted to come in case you had any questions. And there are lots of funding mechanisms that cities have found, the newest one being crowdfunding, where people come up with ideas, they put it out on Kickstarter or Power to Give or a project like that. And this is one that is unique to Winston-Salem, little free library project here, generated over $10,000 for little libraries around the city that are going up. There are a number of challenges, including maintenance, vandalism, liability, and, of course, controversy. Always something to look out for. And I'm here to answer any questions if you'd like.
Thanks, Kelly. Are there any questions about this? Either Kelly can answer questions or some of our audience, if you all want to say a couple of words. Jim? No?
Got to come up.
Yeah. Yeah, if you will, and give your name and address.
I think Kelly's done a really good job, as the planning department has, in putting this together and showing examples. There's great opportunity here in moving forward with a number of initiatives that are happening in the community privately, that this actually sort of helps codify in terms of endorsing and helping us live up to our image as the city of the arts. And a lot of these initial initiatives that are being talked about that I think will help push this as an opportunity won't cost the city any money. There are initiatives and ways to work through some of the traditional challenges that every community has regarding maintenance, liability, and funding in a way that we can use these temporary pieces to work through some of the tweaking that would need to be done on a public art plan that we could be proud of and could maintain. So I think there are a lot of really positive things. I know from working with SECA and some of the other organizations that could not be here, there's a real energy behind the concept of public art as placemaking. So I'm thrilled and very supportive of what Kelly's done.
Thank you, Jim. That's, any questions? There you are. Okay.
What took you so long? You know, when we embarked upon the idea, a concept, whatever, branding of Winston to City of Arts and Innovation, even in my mind, my short tenure, even on the Arts Council and other things that I've been a part of, I never quite understood, you know, as I watched other cities when I would go to them, they were attacking this with such passion. You know, it's a part of their brand, like Philadelphia, the murals on all of the buildings. When you go to Chicago, the fountain that was spitting out, I saw that. The bear in Denver, I saw that. You know, Atlanta, Charlotte, Greensboro. And I've often wondered, and maybe it took you all to come along to help give us the kick in the shin to get going, because there's so much opportunity here. And I don't think you're alone. I think this is also another opportunity for the city and the arts to have a partnership with other parts of the community that are urban and blighted. That's what bigger cities did to improve the blight in the inner city, was they created art. And I think in Winston we can do that. There are organizations, nonprofits, and churches that would love to be able to put, yes, their thumbprint through your process or whatever comes up to us to help make the city better, that they can actually point to and say, you know what, my group got together and raised $5,000, $6,000, $10,000, and that's what we put in our community to help foster creativity and community in Winston. So I think this is a great idea. I think it's a great opportunity, and I can't wait until the process starts and you start sending out the word and we do what we do to help make it happen. I'm on board.
So am I.
Bravo.
Yeah. Thank you again, Kelly. Yeah.
What's next? I hear Mr. Norby coming to the podium.
I don't want us as planning staff to be going and charging off without any direction from that. And so I guess the things that we probably need to know from the council is, do you want to have a public art master plan? And if so, who should do it? Who should be working on it? Things like that. So again, I don't want to assume things and for us to be going off in a direction we shouldn't be going off in.
All right. I will tell you certainly that I have met with a number of people, Jim included, about some of the plans that the Arts Council has that are very exciting. But I think for us to, perhaps staff, to work with the Arts Council, does that sound like the way to go? I mean, certainly you could have staff or council members working with you, but I certainly don't want it to be thought that the council are art critics or whatever, or arts aficionados. I certainly think some sort of master plan in conjunction with our Arts Council is the way to go.
My suggestion would be staff-led with an open invitation to all interested community groups to participate. And I'm not particularly interested in hiring a consultant to do it for us.
We've certainly got consultants as far as with the Arts Council, SECA, and everybody else. I mean, they're the experts on this. Yeah. Yes.
I think we got lots of talent right here at home.
Yes.
The grouping, I mean, we also have, I think, quite a few examples to look at. Other people are doing this, so I don't think we have to start from scratch, but I also think we should put our own spin on it and do something a little different. So if I could get a little more flesh on some of these other master plans and just a little process. I mean, it'll be a process. And I think one thing that staff is very good at is being very inclusive. So I'd like to see just a little bit more meat on what those other master plans look like and what they went through to develop them.
Okay.
And create our own hybrid.
Yeah.
That's something the committee wants to see in the future.
Yeah.
I think so, yes.
Yeah, we'll work with the planning staff. Evan Raleigh in my office has been kind of a point person on public art.
Yes.
And we don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Mm-hmm.
We did talk about a process 5-6 years ago and didn't go anywhere, as you remember.
Yes.
But it is a different council than it was then. So we will bring it forward, and then we can move from there. But certainly, I think that what I heard too, though, is once you actually have a plan, you don't want to be the one picking the art out.
No, I mean, I'll pick my own art. Yes, ma'am.
One more comment, Councilmember Light. In lieu of thinking down the road, and I'm believing that our bond will pass, we talked about how we are moving ahead with creating destination locations within the city of Winston-Salem. Our quarry got art all over it. Winston Lake, art all over it. Salem Lake, art all over it. The trail. All of our other communities, I think with the art master plan incorporated with our parks, recs, and our legacy and everything moving forward, I think this only ties into what we're trying to do. I know there are some people that don't want to grow Winston, but Mr. Norby, what's our number in 2030? 20,000. That's right. We need to be prepared when folks start to look around as they retire and look for other places in America to live, that Winston-Salem is the destination location to come to, because we're going to be able to offer so much more in a small city setting. But if we can tie all of the improvements we're talking about doing in the next 5 years within that and incorporate the art and the other things that we're doing to make our community better, I can't see, again, while we're getting, Mr. Garrity, all of these best place to live, all that stuff, I can't see us not getting more accolades like that. But thank you for bringing that to us. I'm excited about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anything that anyone would like to? Okay, then we are adjourned. And Public Works starts in 5 minutes.